Well, hey everyone, and welcome to our very first deep dive.
It's exciting to be here.
I know, right? I'm super pumped to jump into all sorts of interesting topics.
Me too.
So for our first deep dive, we're going to be talking about something I think a lot of people can relate to.
Yeah.
Even like the best leaders, super experienced, they can totally trip up when they try to do something new.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And the case study we have is about this guy, Ramesh. He was amazing at urban outreach programs.
Yeah.
But when he tried to do a project in a rural area,
Oh.
things did not go as planned.
Yeah, this is like a really interesting one.
Right?
On paper, this guy was a rock star. He knew his stuff. He had the data to prove it.
He was confident.
Totally.
Yeah.
But the question is, why didn't that work in a different setting?
That's what we're here to figure out.
That's the puzzle.
All right, so let's rewind a bit and set the scene.
Look.
So Ramesh, he was killing it in the city.
Yeah.
You know, fast-paced, digital campaigns, everything was measured.
Goals, timeline.
Totally on point.
Yeah, he was a machine.
But then he goes to this rural area.
Yeah.
It's like a whole different world.
You know, it's like that classic contextual blindness.
Oh, yeah, I remember reading about that.
Like his urban playbook, it was perfect for that environment.
Efficient, measurable, all that.
But out in the rural area, things just didn't work like that.
Different pace.
It's more about those personal connections, face-to-face, really taking the time to build trust.
So it's like he shows up with his high-tech tools, ready to go digital.
And the community is like, let's sit down and have a cup of tea.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, and because he was so stuck on his own methods,
Uh-huh.
he missed those differences. He missed that contextual gap.
He was so close to the trees, he missed the forest.
Exactly. And on top of that, he was falling into that confirmation bias trap.
Oh, tell me about that one.
It's basically like he was only paying attention to information that already supported what he thought.
Like he was ignoring anything that didn't fit his worldview.
Yeah, it's like his success created these blinders.
Like he couldn't even see what he was missing.
It's hard to let go of what's worked for you in the past.
Oh, for sure.
And then there's the whole cognitive rigidity thing, too.
What's that?
So in plain English, it means he was super resistant to change because, you know, he had this whole track record.
You get used to doing things a certain way.
Right, like why change if it's always worked? But that's the danger sometimes.
I can only imagine how hard it would be to question your whole approach, especially if you've been successful.
And we can't forget about the human element, you know, the fear.
What?
Fear of looking bad, you know.
Like failing.
Exactly. The material kind of hints that maybe he was scared to adapt because what if people thought he wasn't a good leader anymore?
Interesting. So we have this really competent leader.
Yeah.
But he gets tripped up by, his own brain.
Right. By those biases, by not wanting to change.
And by not seeing the whole picture.
So what happens next? Well, that's where things take a really interesting turn.
Okay. I'm hooked now. Tell me more.
We meet Priya. She's on Ramesh's team. And she has this idea. She wants him to experience the community firsthand.
So get out of the office and go meet the people.
Exactly. Looking back, it seems so simple, right?
Yeah.
But he was stuck in the data. It didn't even occur to him to go out there and see things for himself.
He's about to get a reality check.
Big time. And it changes everything for him.
Okay. I need to know, what did he see out there?
Well, he saw how the people actually interacted, you know, how they valued those one-on-one connections.
They don't care about his fancy data.
They cared about building relationships. They shared information through stories, through those conversations at gatherings.
It's a million miles away from his spreadsheets.
It's a different world. And you know what? That experience, it was like a light bulb moment for him.
Like, oh, I've been doing this all wrong.
He realized he needed a whole new way of thinking about data, about how to collect it.
He needed to get out of his head and into the real world.
He had to start embracing what the material calls empathy-driven data collection.
I love that. Empathy-driven data. What does that even mean?
So it means recognizing that data is important,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not the whole story. You have to factor in what people need, what they value, how they talk to each other.
Like you have to understand the people behind the numbers.
You got it. And that's when he starts to create this data-driven feedback loop.
Data-driven feedback loop.
It's this constant back and forth
Between
the team and the community.
So they try something, they see how people respond.
And then they use that feedback to change their approach.
Okay, so it's way more flexible than that rigid plan he started with.
Way more agile.
I see. So this new way of thinking,
Yeah.
this is starting to help him bridge the gap between his urban expertise and what's actually happening in this rural community.
He's getting there, but what about the way he measures success? That had to change too, right?
Yeah. He was all about the data before. How do you measure success when it's more about those, like, intangible things?
That is a fantastic question.
I guess that's for part 2 of our deep dive.
We'll pick it up right there. Yeah, that's a really good point because all those metrics he was using in the city.
Like website clicks and all that stuff.
Exactly. Social media shares, all those things that made sense in that environment.
They wouldn't really tell you anything useful in a rural setting, would they?
Nope, not at all. They just don't capture that personal side, the community connections.
So what did he do?
Hmm.
Did he just give up on measuring success altogether?
No, he just needed to find new ways to measure it, things that were relevant to the community.
Okay, so what did he start tracking instead?
Well, for one, he looked at engagement at those community gatherings.
Oh, so like how many people showed up, how involved they were.
Exactly, and also how information spread through word of mouth.
Word of mouth, that's a classic.
Right, and he started doing something called influence mapping.
Wait, influence mapping? What is that?
So it's basically like figuring out who the key people in the community are.
Oh, like the influencers?
Kind of, but think more like respected elders, community leaders, the people everyone trusts.
Okay.
And then you figure out how to engage with them authentically.
Because they're the ones who can really get the word out.
Precisely. It's not about broadcasting a message. It's about nurturing those connections.
Makes sense. So it's like the metrics themselves had to become more human, more focused on relationship.
And that's a really important lesson for anyone who's working with diverse communities.
Yeah. Your measurements have to be meaningful in that specific context.
Not just some generic numbers game.
So Ramesh is embracing empathy. He's adapting his approach. He's even changing how he measures success. And things are starting to turn around.
He's bridging that gap between his urban expertise and the realities of this rural community.
But what about his leadership style? That seemed to be a big part of the problem early on.
Right, he was so resistant to change at first, but that's where humility comes in.
So he finally admitted that he needed to do things differently.
And that's the thing, realizing that you need to change, it doesn't make you a weaker leader.
In fact, it shows that you're really committed to succeeding no matter what it takes.
It shows you're willing to learn and grow.
And according to the material, Ramesh even started working with a leadership coach to help him with this.
Yeah, someone who really emphasized flexibility and humility.
So he started seeing this rural project not as a failure, but as a chance to learn and improve.
And that shift in his thinking, it really trickled down to the whole team.
Okay, I'm curious, what did this new team dynamic look like?
Well, for starters, he got rid of that top-down approach.
He let go of some control.
He had to. He created what the material calls a non-hierarchical feedback structure.
Meaning?
It means everyone on the team, no matter their role, they felt comfortable sharing their thoughts and ideas.
So like the field workers could talk directly to the data analysts.
Exactly. It broke down those silos and made decision-making way more inclusive.
I bet that made a huge difference.
Oh, absolutely. And to keep that collaboration going, he started these cross-domain knowledge-sharing sessions.
Okay, break that down for me.
Basically, it was a chance for the urban team and the rural team to learn from each other.
They could share best practices, different perspectives.
Exactly. It was all about creating this more holistic approach.
And I'm guessing that's where the rural champions come in, right?
You got it. They were instrumental in making sure the strategy actually resonated with the community.
So they were kind of like cultural translators.
You could say that.
They bridged the gap between the team and the people they were trying to reach.
They were the voice of the community, making sure everything was culturally sensitive and relevant.
It sounds like Ramesh was really hitting all the right notes with this new approach.
All the pieces were falling into place, the empathy-driven data, the collaboration, the local knowledge. It was all coming together. But the question is, did it work?
Yeah, did all of this actually make a difference in the rural community?
Did it work? I think the material speaks for itself.
So what happened?
Basically, it was a complete turnaround.
Like night and day.
Yeah. Engagement in the community skyrocketed. People were actually excited about the project.
That's awesome.
The relationships between the team and the villagers, they became so much more genuine, less transactional.
I bet the team was happier too.
Oh, yeah. Morale went through the roof. It makes sense when you think about it.
Yeah, when you feel like you're part of something meaningful when your voice is heard.
And when you're actually making a difference, it changes everything.
It's like that sense of shared purpose, like
Yeah.
everyone's working together towards a common goal.
It's powerful stuff.
So Ramesh's journey is a pretty amazing example of how leadership isn't about always being right or having all the answers.
It's about being willing to learn to adapt, to be humble.
And it's funny how those qualities that we sometimes see as weaknesses, like humility, flexibility, empathy,
Yeah,
those actually turned out to be his biggest strengths.
absolutely. They allowed him to break free from that rigid mindset he had and become a much more effective leader.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners? What can we learn from Ramesh's experience?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is to be aware of those cognitive biases, those mental shortcuts that we all use.
They can be helpful sometimes.
Right. But they can also lead us down the wrong path, especially when we're dealing with new or challenging situations.
We can get so stuck in our own ways of thinking that we miss important information or different perspectives.
Exactly. And to overcome that, we need to be open to new ideas, to feedback,
We need to surround ourselves with people who will challenge us,
and be willing to change our minds.
which can be hard.
It can be, especially when you're used to being the one in charge.
But none of us have all the answers. And the sooner we embrace that, the better off we'll be.
As leaders, as colleagues, as human beings.
Because at the end of the day, it's about being curious, showing empathy, and always being willing to learn and grow.
It's an ongoing journey.
It is. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a question to think about.
Okay,
What's one area in your life where you might be stuck in your ways or clinging to an old approach?
and what's one small step you can take to break free from that, to see things from a new perspective?
Thanks for joining us on this exploration, and we'll be back soon with another deep dive into something new and fascinating. Until then, keep learning and keep growing.